Everybody, so welcome to episode 36 of Celebrating the Brand Ambassador. I'm really excited to have here with me today Misty Kalkofen from Del Maguey and Jaime Salas from Proximo Spirits and all things Agave and the Tequila Guy. If you go on Instagram, it's just the Tequila Guy. I'm excited to be here. Tequila is definitely one of my favorite spirits. And also mezcal. So it's very exciting. And I've known both of you guys for a long time. You know, we don't get to spend enough time together, but we've definitely, we all kind of got into it around the same time, different paths. So speaking of that, I would love for you I always start off with the same question. Which is Misty. So tell me, what is the company you work for and what is your role and responsibilities?
Okay, so I work for Del Maguey Single Village Mezcal. My title is Madrina, which, we have very unusual titles. We don't have the typical brand ambassador titles or anything like that. But, my role has changed quite a bit in the last couple of years, just obviously as it has been the case for many people. But if we were in a normal circumstance, I run all of our loyalty trips to Oaxaca. So I take bartenders and sales reps and distributor partners down for immersive experiences to meet our producers, to learn everything about our products firsthand. Prior to the pandemic, I was spending about 50% of my time in Oaxaca, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And so that means I spend a lot of time on education. I also manage our brand ambassadors here in the States, which is just awesome for me. I really love to be close with each of them and stay connected to everything that's happening in the markets here.
Awesome. I love it. And Jaime, what is your new role for you? So, yeah.
It is a new role, but funny enough, much like Misty's, it's very similar in terms of what I do, the responsibilities I have day in and day out. So to your point, I am recently appointed the head of advocacy for the Agave portfolio with Proximo Spirits, which encompasses a lot of brands across both tequila and mezcal, as both of you already know. And I love the fact that I'm still able to do exactly some of the things that Misty mentioned. Head of an ambassador team, first and foremost, consisting of soon to be 15 people. So that's quite a big feat, but excited to lead the charge when it comes to advocating clearly for the spirit as well as the culture behind it. And then ultimately, leading trips down to Mexico so people can experience them. These immersion trips that Misty mentioned, which I think are crucial to what we do. Mm-hmm. So education at the forefront, experiential clearly. And really it's about getting people entrenched in the love and communicating the passion that we have for the spirit. That's how I romanticize what I do, right? Day in and day out, we all know. we all know it requires a lot of administration, a lot of logistical challenges, a lot of organization, and a lot of travel. But all in all, it's all well worth it, given the chance to spread our love for the agave category with the masses.
No, I know it does sound so romantic, right? And it is. It's why you get out of bed every day. You're like, I have the best job in the world, and then there's all the other shit that happens. So you can actually do that one job. I'm going to Berlin to talk about all the stuff I've learned, to kind of dispel the romantic. Like, this is the best job in the world, but here's all the other stuff you need to mentally be prepared for. And that kind of leads me to my next question, which was, what were you doing right before? Like, what was the job you had before you became a brand ambassador? And then, what about the role of brand ambassador appealed to you to make you make that switch? So, Missy, I know you have a very specific story. There was definitely some things in your life that you wanted to make a change. So, yeah, but tell us, it's real for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I was bartending right up until I started working for Del Maguey, but I was starting to have some serious problems with my joints, and it became obvious to me that I was not going to be able to be the lifelong bartender that I really thought I was going to be. And so looking at my options, if I wanted to stay in the industry, what are my options? And so opening a bar, obviously, looking towards owning my own space. I wasn't ready to do that. I wanted to be able to travel. I wanted some flexibility. And I've seen too many bars where their owner wasn't there hands-on, that didn't make it. It's that's such an important part to being successful when you're opening a spot. So I wasn't ready to do that in any sort of way, not counting it out forever, but, wasn't the moment for that. Obviously I could work for a distributor, but that, means I don't get to choose the products that I'm representing then. And that's really challenging for me because I have zero poker face. So I really need to love the things I'm talking about. And so it seemed like the logical step to go into brand work, but I kind of started really kind of advocating with Ron that I really wanted to work for him. And that was like a 3-year process because the company just wasn't at a point where it could support an ambassador at that point in time. And so I made a point of going and sitting down with him in New York when he was visiting one time, about almost 3 years to the day from when I was actually hired, to have the conversation about, like, I know you're probably not there yet, but you will be. Your company is growing and I really want to be a part of it. So when you get to that point of hiring somebody, I want you to think about it being me. And so it was like, manifesting. I like to say I conjured my job to a certain degree.
Hey, you manifested. You put it out in the universe. The universe delivers. I'm a big believer in that.
But it was really, for me, I had been down to Oaxaca with Ron a couple years earlier and had seen everything from start to finish, and I believed in everything about it, and that was so important to me. And so it was a big step, and not the smoothest from like an emotional standpoint in a lot of ways, but it was great, and obviously it's been 9 years now practically, and so obviously the right step for me.
Yeah, obviously it worked out. And also I love the fact that just to jump in a little bit, you also did something after you had that conversation with Ron where you started actually becoming the mezcal resource in Boston.
Yeah, Ron was really kind of doing everything on his own at that point in time, traveling around with the green bottles in his bag and everything. And so as he was planting the seeds throughout the country, there were so many people asking for education who were bringing his products on, but he couldn't be all those places at the same time. And so I kind of became a go-to for him, that he wanted somebody who'd had that experience of being in Oaxaca and seeing and everything firsthand and meeting the producers to be the one talking about it if he wasn't. And so I was able to kind of start my journey and get my feet under me before I even had the job, which is, and I became a resource for the wider community, both for tequila and mezcal, because there wasn't really a renaissance in the agave spirits yet. So to have somebody who was passionate about it, when there really nobody had ambassadors in those for those categories yet at that point in time, it was really beneficial for me in a lot of ways, and for the community here in Boston to really get to a point of better understanding.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's doing the job that people ask me all the time how to become a brand ambassador. Sometimes it is doing the job you want before you actually have the job.
100%. I think that when Mary Pollock was on Eric Castro's podcast recently, she was talking about the importance of putting yourself out there, and she was talking about it as how to raise awareness about a community that's just kind of getting recognition within the hospitality industry. But I think it's the same thing. If there's a specific direction that you want to go as far as a brand ambassador is concerned, start putting yourself out there and getting involved as much as you can within that community and the people that are already representing it.
No, absolutely. 100%. Jaime, I know you've been nodding because you did a lot of the same. I mean, you've been the tequila guy for quite some time. So what were you doing before you became the tequila guy? Or you've always been the tequila guy?
Well, it's funny.
There's an agave in my hand.
I think at heart, I've always been the tequila guy, right? I think that's why it became a natural progression. I have been in love with agave distillate since I can remember. Just having a family from Jalisco, splitting time between Mexico and here has really sort of culturally impacted me, right? I mean, I have a bicultural outlook on life, and I'm the reverse of like Misty, perhaps, in that, she's, American born, loves Mexico, and I grew to love and appreciate all the beautiful things that the U.S. afforded me, right? But with that sort of entrenchment and that tie back to Mexico, that really helped to sort of shape me and my love for a lot of things Mexican. But perhaps its biggest and best export, tequila and agave distillate. So I personally was no longer bartending right before this job. And I've been doing this for about 20 years now as a career ambassador, if you will.
Wow. Okay.
And that's kind of where I think, and then later you and I crossed paths, but I was back in California at the time. And again, here I am known amongst my friends as somebody who's very passionate about tequila. So a friend approached me about Diageo putting together their first ever ambassador program. Now, they had whiskey ambassadors, as you may recall, but they did not have any agave ambassadors, specifically to represent Cuervo brands, Tradicional, Receta de la Familia, and then, of course, Don Julio at the time. So the job came to me. So I would also like to say that I somewhat manifested it, albeit subconsciously, because I do believe it.
You put it out there, it will come.
Funny enough, I do believe in manifestation. I think that's a very powerful thing. I think we as human beings can do this. And I know part of this I was going to call it podcast. Part of this interview is to also sort of enlighten folks on how our paths, but then how they can pursue whatever lifelong dreams or aspirations they may have. So for me, it really was about putting myself up there. Like, yeah, granted, I didn't do it in a very formatted way. The way Missy did it is something I would absolutely advise someone do that now, for example, right? Given where we are and that there are people like me, like Misty, that can connect these folks to the distillers and to the makers and say, look, this person is equally as passionate. Consider them for a potential role down the line, because that is kind of how you get to the forefront of being acknowledged and being sought after, etc. But back then there was very few of us, to Misty's point, right? And Misty spoke specifically about Boston, and that's true, because it brought my head to a space of interesting how, back then I was California, then evolved to greater, then I moved on to other brands. And again, 20 years now. I started, I was doing a job for the county. I was working for the government. I don't think a lot of people know this. And then it was moonlighting, because again, I didn't want to leave the bar stuff. I didn't want to leave the cocktail scene. I didn't want to sort of abandon my first passion, which was music, DJing, nightlife, hospitality, and all that. So I did that at night, would drag my butt off in the mornings to work for the government, which is very exciting, as you can imagine. So when this opportunity came my way,
I've had one other person on here who also worked for the government. It will come to me. But
I have a very, very varied job. That I know this isn't about me in my previous job, my CV, but I fell in love. So I love tequila, etc. The opportunity came to me, and I think what I really want to share with folks is that, I remember it being said to me, your job is going to be to talk about tequila, drink tequila, right? Give classes on tequila, essentially, and travel doing it. And I thought to myself, this is a lie. The first thing I thought was, that came later. The first thing I thought was, this is absolutely a lie. This is a setup. There's absolutely no way that I get to do the thing I love to do for free and get paid for it. So the end and short of it is, I took a leap of faith. I went into it. It wanted to be true. Clearly, here I am. They do pay. There were benefits. They do pay, and it sustained my life until now. But I think the biggest takeaway is that yes, go after the things you love. Take a leap of faith sometimes. And I think what's most important is in those 20 years, and I know we'll get to this, but I think how I now want to transform this position, or how I want to apply myself in this position, is truly what's changed, along with the industry and trying to navigate that as well. So interesting.
I think that's great. And we will talk about it, like how you grow within the role, because when we first started, I know like in 2005, and I became there was no path forward. Like there was like, you became a brand ambassador, and then you became a senior brand ambassador, and then maybe you became a global, and maybe you ran the brand ambassadors, but there was no other place. Where now, I've seen it with many people I've interviewed where they've gone internally into the company, because the companies are now recognizing brand ambassadors as a valuable resource, not just somebody who does education, but somebody with insights on the street. And the one thing that a lot of people talk about is that, now they're learning marketing and strategy and things of that nature, because it's helping them to be a more valuable resource to the team. But we'll talk about that, some of the education. But there is definitely, and I know you didn't switch directly from bartender to BA, but there is definitely some things when you first become like a brand ambassador working for a corporation, that I've had many people share, like some of the things that have happened. They're like, fuck, like when you first take on the role, some of the challenges. And Misty, I'll start with you because I love your story of your first day.
Oh my God, my first day, funny enough, was April Fool's Day, which makes the story all the better. I closed the bar that I was working at the night before, wasn't one of my last shifts. And I'm like, I have a new job tomorrow. I have this daytime job tomorrow, right? And so set my alarm nice and early, got up, took a shower, I'm making my coffee and everything. And then I was like, but now what do I do? Right. And so my boss, still the same boss now, Michael Gardner, he lives on the West Coast. And this just happened to be right around the Easter holidays. And I didn't know it, but he was on personal time off that day. So I literally didn't hear anything from him until about 2 to 3 in the afternoon when he finally got down to someplace. He was out in the mountains with his family, got out to some place where he actually had a service and the signal and could send me a message about like, these are the things I want you to do this week. So for 6 hours, I was sitting there going, from about 8:30 on being like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. Yeah,
At least it was only 6 hours, because there are people I know go on for weeks. They're like, I'm not sure what my job is.
Well, I mean, and honestly, that first email was like, make sure your email is set up, really basic things, to get started. But it was really like 6 hours of like, I have a new job and I have no idea what it is, so crazy. But honestly, I think the hardest thing for me when we got started was that, I went from a job where I saw the immediate gratification of the results of what I was doing. And all of a sudden I didn't have that anymore. Right. And so I was experiencing so much anxiety because I didn't feel like I was accomplishing anything. And I'm lucky enough to have a very astute friend that I was speaking with about this. And he was like, oh, Misty, it's like you're turning a luxury liner right now. The things you're doing, you're not going to see the results of that for 6 months, probably. It's a very different thing. Before, you were putting a drink in front of somebody and they liked it or they didn't like it. And if they didn't like it, you got them something else. And then that transaction was done and you had accomplished something.
Yes.
Now you're out and you're working in a market and you're educating and you're not going to see the ROI of that until months later. Mm-hmm. And so you just need to take a deep breath and trust that you're making the right steps in the process at this point in time. And you will see the results, but it's just not going to be immediate. And so once I had that conversation, I was like, oh, I can breathe now. Yeah. I am not terrible at it's true that I am not terrible at my job.
Yep. You are so
no, we won't. We won't know that for 6 to 8 months from now. We won't know that for 6 to 8 months from now, whether or not you're effective at your job, right? That's the hardest thing.
And you should write that on a wall. I used to have to write in my, like, I don't suck at my job. I'm doing the right things. Like, I don't suck. I'm doing the right things. I'm not getting fired today just because nobody's talked to me in a week. Like, it doesn't mean anything.
That's so true.
We now appreciate a quiet email day, right? Whereas before,
oh my God,
yes. Pins and needles.
You would panic. Like, why isn't my boss asking me? They're talking to me. Are they talking about me behind my back? Are they starting to think about firing me? What's going on? I don't know. Yeah, no. Oh my God, the paranoia. Yeah, is unbelievable. Yeah. And Jaime, how about for you? Like when you first became,
it was very similar. It was very similar. Funny enough, you wouldn't think so, but listen, I came from chaos, knowing, I'm a doer as well. I don't want to put words, but I assume what I got from that is Misty likes to do. I know most of us either bartended or know this industry in a way that, you work with all the elements you have, you put these together, you construct new things, and you kind of figure it out in many ways. And I can't say much has changed from 20 years ago, if I'm honest, in terms of how we induct, how we immerse, and how we, for example, take one of our own ambassadors and grow them and lead them down the path of success, can look very different from brand to brand, but nevertheless, they bring about a lot of challenges because the process changes, the industry changes, how we approach the industry changes, right? The personalities involved. The truth is there is no one way, unlike a brand manager or someone else in terms of how you educate and you bring them up line, up the ladder. Ambassadorship is a little different, right? Wouldn't you agree? Like it's a little tougher. So I would say that as much as I can agree with Misty, I was absolutely like, what's going on? I'm ready to do, and to both of your points, listen, we're planting these little lijuelos, these little seeds, and we're hoping that whether it's a blue Tequilana Weber, in 6 to 8 years, we reap some reward, or whether it's you name it, right, Misty, a 25-year-old maturing agave. All these things take time. When we talk about advocacy, when we talk about growing brand equity, which is what we were doing, which was what we are doing, right? Regardless of how we approach it, how impassioned we are by it, that's ultimately what we want to accomplish in terms of a business sense. So for me, I started the job. It was really hard. And there I was trying to make it work. And I was like, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right? To your point, no one was knocking saying, hey, you're on the right path. People were just kind of like, yeah, but make sure you accomplish X. And I'm like, okay, I got this. I'm a doer. I can get this. I don't need much instruction. I'm very self-enabled. Cool. And then I would do these things, right? And then slowly but surely, I started to get the hang of it, and I started to develop my own work style, depending on the output I had to give. But it was a lot of learning and missteps, to be quite honest. There were moments where I was like, I'm not sure this is the route I want to take. And when you work for a larger company, unlike Del Maguey at the time, right, which wasn't part of with Pernod then, it was difficult in some sorts, because here I had the brand advocacy, which was my passion side, my passion point, if you will, and then I had to deal with the sales side, right, which is the ultimate immediate gratifying. We talk about that transactional return. That was the crux of the job at the time. It was more, it was a hybrid role, right? It was trying to accomplish both. And at the time, not really truly having me being at the wheel of this initiative. It was being told what to do. And I would say back then, I was really, really, for all intents and purposes, like the definition of an ambassador. Someone that was given, information and was told to say, and here's the program in which you're going to lead with, which changed and looked very differently to me later on in my career, when I started to actually lead these charges and create these programs, and find my own voice in terms of how I reach the bartender, the trade, the consumer, which was a fun part of the job. But at the beginning, a big mess. Quite honestly, right?
So many people are like, the biggest mistake I hear so many people talk about is that, and I did it too. I know it's like you present what people give you, and because they're like whatever slides I gave you or whatever, and you don't have your own voice yet, and you sound so dull, right? Because you're just like presenting something because you're like, I shouldn't veer from what's on this thing because I don't know if I should. And then as you start to grow in your role and you become a bigger expert in whatever category you're talking about, or understand how the sales and marketing side works, you can find your own voice. And that definitely takes a moment, right? And then you can present whatever slide is up there. You're like, yeah, I'm going to take what's off that slide and I'm going to present it in my own way, because none of that makes sense to me because somebody in a marketing team wrote it, and it's just a lot of shit. So I'm going to take what I think it means and throw it out there. And if it's wrong, most times it's not.
It's so important, though. I mean, and I think for me, as managing our ambassador team, that's one of the coolest things for me, is that moment when to watch as people are finding a voice, right? And so, of course, we have the decks that we provide to them, because there are key points that they need to hit. There are things that are super, super important, but as you're working with them and they're practice presenting with you, to hear how they're finding their voice and saying those things is so important, because it's like, there's no way that Evan in Florida can talk to people the same way about agave spirits as Jen in LA can, because the markets are so different, and they're at different parts in their journey of understanding agave and mezcal, and so you have to be the right ambassador for where you are, and so it can't be cookie cutter. That won't be effective. You won't accomplish anything.
No, I think it brings a good point, because you should never, as a brand ambassador, you can find people you admire and like their style, but you do always have to find your own style. Like you really can't be somebody else. You can pick some of the parts about them. You're like, oh, I like what they do and how they present this and how they do that. But, but sometimes that could be harmful to yourself, I almost find, because you're constantly comparing yourself to that person. I'm not as good as that person. I don't know as much as that person. It's like, no, you have to find your own. Like, you can admire them and aspire to, but you need to be your own person. And one day you'll get to where you feel that confidence. But yeah, just keep going for it. At least that's my humble opinion. All right, so we're talking about something that was challenging. All right, so you both have had, and currently Missy and Jaime, you said you still have, this is also going to be part of your role, where you are immersing people, you're bringing people the trade to Mexico, you're bringing your advocates to Mexico, you're bringing distributors to Mexico. to immerse them in the culture, the people, the food, the agave spirits. Tell me why you think it's really vital for people to have this experience. I mean, I think it's probably obvious, but I'd love to hear from your own words. And what do you think surprises most people when they get down there? I'm sure a lot of people like have their own views and then they get down there. And this also, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about how you guys kind of cross paths, like at some point. I mean, I forget what your question was, but I liked it, and we're going to talk about it. So let's talk about my question first, and Jaime, you could talk about yours. So so tell me like your role, Misty, and like what's the impact you think it has on people when you bring them down there?
Well, I think first and foremost, you can't separate mezcal from the larger culture of the communities where it's made. And we can talk about that all we want, but unless you're actually experiencing it firsthand, it doesn't translate in any sort of way. And I think that's super important. This mezcal is a cultural beverage, and so you have to find a way to get people engaged with that culture in a firsthand experience. And when we're talking about size and scale and all of that kind of stuff, I can show all the pictures in the world, but until you're in Santa Maria and you see the one still that every bottle of Tobola and Tepestate and Jabali comes out of for the entire world, you're not going to get it, right? Like it's like
I will agree, because I hear this story. I've never had the pleasure, and I've made it a mission next couple of years when traveling like that, I will make it down to Oaxaca. Because you just hear about it, but you're like, is it really? Is it? And I believe it only because I know Steve and Ron, but it's like I bet you there's a lot of skepticism until you see it.
100%. And everything from the actual production process, obviously. And there's something very special, I think, also for the producers to be able to interact with the bartenders. That's super important. They for them to be able to hear the love and appreciation directly from the people who are consuming it and selling it is extremely important. Our producers have as many questions for the bartenders a lot of times as the bartenders do for the producers, And I think that's super important that there's that direct connection from both sides of the equation. But so everything.
I have to stop you right there. Like, what's a question like maybe some of your producers have ever asked them?
It's things about like how much they sell at their bars, like things around that, because they don't necessarily have a concept of how much is being gone through at each individual establishment. And so obviously the answer in regards to that is it can be a wide range depending upon the group I have. But when you have somebody down there who works at ABV, which just like blows through all of their agave products, for a producer to hear that number, they're like, wow,
that would make them so happy.
Yeah, and a lot of questions around like if they've ever experienced something like what they're seeing, because a lot of the bartenders will make comparisons to other spirits that they've toured, or their experiences in tequila even, and so when they're making those comparisons, it kind of sparks questions around how their production is different, which is really interesting as well. And so there's, I think that's super important, but they're also really surprised even at the bottling facility. We're using 6 bottle gravity fed fillers to bottle Del Maguey for the world. And they're just like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And so I think, a lot of times I think transparency is so important, and we're really honest in the way that we talk about what we do. But I think there is a lot of skepticism because that's not the case for all brands. And so to be able to show that like what we're talking about is the reality of the situation, is really important.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And Jaime, have you experienced the same thing?
Yeah, similar paths. I think that to that I would add, yes, it's an opportunity for that cultural exchange. It's an opportunity for folks to understand in depth what it is that we're doing, what it is more importantly that we're not. We talk about the skepticism to Misty's point, right? In terms of this perceivable understanding of the category, and therefore, you must do it the same, or because you're bigger, you do it this way, or because you're smaller, you do it this way. The truth is, even among small producers, you find tons of variation that is beautiful in its own right, depending on what it is and whether or not you value it, right? This all comes down to ultimately showcasing what you do, having that cultural exchange, which I think for me is particularly important. One of the benefits I think we get, I've always said in my career that, you will never make a better ambassador, if you will, a better advocate of your brand than someone who's been down to visit, right? It's like inviting somebody over to your house. But what I love about it in particular is that this misunderstanding, this misconception of also Mexican culture. As someone who spans across both tequila and mezcal, for example, I love that we can talk about the differences within both, not only in terms of processes and production, but ultimately culturally, right? Mexico is a massive country. It's no different than the US. Every region has different dialects, different types of food preparation, right? And clearly different drinking customs and different production customs of certain agave spirits. And I think that's also important to note, is that for me, it's a holistic experience. One that hopefully enlightens you on what we're about, how we are made amongst a bigger category of spirits. So for me, it's always twofold. It's better understanding tequila production as well as mezcal production, and then ultimately understanding where these brands like a Maestro Dobel compares to like a Gran Centenario within our portfolio, or then 400 Conejos, in Creyente, and how they vary. And then of course, when we talk about how they differ amongst categories. And then further talk about raicilla. When I take people down to Guadalajara or whatever, I then also go, we also go and taste raicilla. We're going to taste all of the other spirits that are locally appreciated and currently being really, highlighted, because again, this is about a bigger comprehensive understanding of something that is very cultural to Mexico, very much a passion point right now. And I think it helps, all boats rise with the tide. I know we all say that and we all talk about that, but the truth is, those of us that are leading the agave charge, there's a small group of us. And for me, we're all friends, contrary to what people think, right? We're all friendly, we're all friends, we're all good. We'll talk about, we talked about Misty. I mentioned earlier that, I remember Misty early on when she was getting into the mezcal thing, and she was still bartending that drink, and she was then doing the mezcal thing. And I remember thinking, what, this is beautiful to watch, right? You watch people entrench on something, it's not for me to say, but there is a part of me that culturally goes, someone is coming over. It's not just tequila or agave for me. So for me, oftentimes it's Mexico. It's Mexico, right? Like, you're coming over to love, you're crossing the border emotionally, and you're entrenching on what I hope will be a lifelong love affair with a culture, and not just a byproduct of that culture, right? Hopefully you love tacos along with tequila and mezcal and what have you, but really it's about the holistic immersion, which I happen to know Misty did really embrace. Not everyone does that, right? But so to me, it's a particular soft spot, because to me, it's you've come over to try to understand better, and more importantly, you're going to go back and talk about it, and that is a beautiful thing to watch. And I just remember early on watching Misty, and then of course you see everybody escalate. You're doing your thing as well, and you're still in this cosm. You're still working around each other, and you're still doing it. And you're ultimately, we're competing brands in many ways. When you think about the landscape, all brands there, brands within certain portfolios are competing. But at the end of the day, I am still a huge proponent of, this is about elevating and hopefully, engaging the trade bartenders to better understand what we are in terms of facing brands. But then ultimately, there is a backdrop, which is the culture. And I think that's the biggest takeaway whenever you bring anybody to Mexico, is that they go back with a better understanding of what we are as a Mexican American, more importantly with what we are not, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I have sometimes is this perception, this misperception of what Mexico is. Burros and donkeys and trains with chickens on them, and no sort of infrastructure, this kind of thing, which in some parts is considered as beautiful, it's considered as quaint, etc. We have that old world charm as well. But it's a lot more than that, just like our spirits are. So for me, I think that's the biggest takeaway. And I think that's probably the part of the job that I love the most, is to your point, watch those people sort of brighten and lighten up when they better understand the culture behind the spirits that they're in love with.
No, I love it. I think that's so many great points. Misty, were you going to say something?
Jaime, you said one thing that I think is so important, and it's something that I think about a lot, is that, like, when you take people down, it really kind of sparks this conversation about value. What do you value, right? Because when we talk about value, we're usually talking about price point in comparison to, like, is it a value brand and things like that. And the truth is, like, there's, especially in the agave spirits right now, there's like this race to the bottom, trying to be the lowest price, mezcal for the well or whatever. And that is not good for anybody, to be honest, especially at the beginning of the supply chain, with the people that are actually making the product. And so I think this question about what do you value is super important. And I think when you have that opportunity to show somebody firsthand how the spirit is made, their perception around that changes about like why we won't go lower than a certain dollar amount on a particular product. It's because it's this, it's because this is a truly laborious process, but it's a labor of love, and it needs to be compensated appropriately. And so I think that value, that word value, is so important to the trips and why they're important. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No, you're right. You're enhancing.
And mezcal should not be discounted. It should not be something that's an inexpensive product. And oh my God, now I'm forgetting. From ABV, what is his?
Ryan.
Ryan. Yes, Ryan. Okay, Ryan. He was on my panel I did for Tales one year about tequila, and I know that was his big thing, like about making sure people are paying the right price and that it should not be a cheap product, and it should be something that it shows value because there's so much love and energy, and it's a product that takes 10 years to get into a bottle between the time 8 years, like between the time the agaves are grown and harvested. It's not just like vodka, just like one wipe of the fields of grain and like it's distilled and boom, you have vodka, which can be made very, very cheaply. So I think there's a big point to that. I'll never forget, just to add to this, we were talking about convincing people and skepticism. I personally take responsibility for turning Bobby Ugle.
I would paraphrase. I would rephrase rather.
Yeah, I don't know what the word is. I took him away. Like, he had Don Julio on the wall of like, we will not support these brands, and him and I didn't know each other very well. And I was in Texas, and I went to go see him, and we sat down at Anvil, and we talked for a while, and I was like, what's up with the wall? And then he told me his reasons. And then I said, tell me what you think how Don Julio is made. And then he then told me things, and I was like, yep, that's not true. That's not true. And like, I kept dispelling all the things, and he was, to his credit, he listened. He was like, okay, interesting. I will definitely reconsider. I was like, what is your goal? And his goal was to, obviously in his mind, was to bring attention to the bigger brands that they need to make changes. Like, they need to do things to contribute to, like, cross cultivation of agaves, making sure that the blue agave doesn't get wiped out by, disease, because everybody's, they're just mass producing. And there were other things. I was like, that's great, but this is not the way to do it. So let's talk about it. And I'll never forget, like, it was like a year and a half or 2 years later, he did take it off the wall eventually. And, but he texted me from Don Julio. He's like, you'll never guess where I am right now. He went to Don Julio, and Enrique de Colsa took him around. And I kind of converted him, I think, a little bit. But, because he really had, thoughts in his brain, like, this is how things are done. And I was like, I can understand why you would think that, but let's like talk through it. But yeah, I felt very proud of myself. I give myself a high five with that one, because he's not an easy person to convince about anything. But yeah, so anyway, but I do think, I'm wondering, just something to put out there in the world, I think we need to start bringing consumers on those kind of trips, like that, people who are enthusiasts, because I think they would become such big advocates if they got to see the other side of Mexico. Because to your point, Jaime, like, they only, they have certain visuals, and a lot of people only go to Cancun or whatever it is. And only the lucky get to go to like Mexico City and Oaxaca and Guadalajara and just experience Mexico and its trueness and like all the art and culture. I've had the pleasure, when I worked for Anheuser-Busch, more than anything else, I had to go to Mexico City constantly, and to, God, now I'm forgetting the other city I had to go to. It's a very cultural, like, food city. And it really opened my eyes a lot. But I think consumers, one day, I think we have to start doing like kind of Julio did for Bermejo used to do at his bar, San Francisco. He used to bring the people who passed his test down to Mexico, which is a really tough test to take, by the way.
A lot of practical happens on that test. Much like,
I'm like,
Yeah, I
don't
was
know
just
if I think
thinking.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how much practice I've had, and I saw Misty pour herself a little
Yeah,
coquita, so then I
exactly.
poured myself some Maestro
Myself.
Nobel Cristalina. Yeah, no, it's funny because yes, it's you're right. I think I think the more people we have talking about it, right? The more people than
Mhm.
ourselves. And I think ultimately, as ambassadors or as stewards, as the word changes, as the definition changes, because it does also vary, right, from producer to producer, from employer to employer. I mean, the other day I walked into a store and I saw it was for gum. I forget which brand, but it was like, hey, I have this ambassador over there. Give you a stick of that gum, and I thought, great. I thought this is where we're I thought this is where we're at. I was like, because we've gone from sampler to ambassador to et cetera. But
Yeah.
I think that anytime you can create sort of a conversation and a reason to talk about something, and I oftentimes we've Elaine, you and I spoke about it the last time we were together. And we had a conversation on camera. Social currency, right? That to me is still a very viable word. It's something that I constantly use as an example of we in the industry love social currency. We love the ability to say, I know more than you do, or I've experienced something you haven't. However, we tend to want to be more inclusive because after all, it is knowledge, and knowledge is meant to be shared. It's not meant to be hoarded, as far as I'm
Mhm.
concerned. And
No,
that is what I love about this job.
it's what I
Right. It gives
also
me a
love about the
platform to do
industry.
that.
Most people, in the
Right.
beginning, a lot of people kept things close, but then people started realizing the more people they know and the more they share. I always tell people when they ask me about how to get into the industry, I said, this is an incredible industry. If you are willing to learn, there is somebody willing to teach you. And you have to do the work. I said, but if you just say, this is what I would like to know, you can find people to share their knowledge. And I think that's how most of us advanced in our own careers, is like other people mentored us and were willing to kind of give us the knowledge that we asked. We did the work and they were willing to provide it to us. So, which is incredible. And I still feel that is true today. And so many corporations are now getting involved in that, which is amazing. Okay, so let's get into like, what do you think is the next thing coming out of Mexico?
I mean, I think we're just going to see a proliferation of more of the more regional agave beverages being available, which is amazing. It's like, obviously, as a brand, we're honored to be a part of the denomination of origin, but there are a lot of families that have been making mezcal for generations who, because of where they're located or because they don't have the means to actually be certified, cannot use the word mezcal on their product, right? And so you're starting to see all of these regional beverages that are being more readily available as people are importing destilados de agave. And that's really cool because it's going to show even more so the diversity and of just not just the agave spirits, but the culture of Mexico as well. And so I think we're just going to continue to see that. And I think as more certifying agencies come on board for even within the category of mezcal, we're going to see more brands coming from regions outside of Oaxaca and Puebla and Michoacan. Some of those states that are in the denomination of origin, but we don't see a lot of products coming from them. And so I think that's really what's going to be, and a lot of rum. I think we're going to see rum and more whiskeys as well too. People are really embracing the heirloom corn and seeing what they can do with that. And posh, just really traditional regional beverages that people are becoming excited about.
No, I love it. I know Casa Lumbre, right? They have their whiskey. They have their corn whiskey from Mexico, and they have a vodka. Jaime, what do you think?
I agree. I think that we're going to see a much bigger expansion of representation of a category, right? And to Missy's point, whether it's touted as mezcal, because I think that's another misconception that we're going to face, right? And then we have to deal with how we break that down so that we can better talk about our respective brands. It's not a bad thing to be called an agave distillate. If you cannot afford to get certified as mezcal officially, you're still qualifiable in that regard. Yeah. But again, it's breaking down those barriers and helping people understand that. I agree that you're going to see more of that, which I'm excited about in particular. I think it again, all boats rise with the tide is where I would apply this sentiment, right? Is that it's going to help all of us to better talk about. It's going to propel us further to really engage in a way where people are interested in different things happening within the category spirit that we profess to be probably the greatest in the world. Or maybe I'm just the one doing that. But there's that. So I think the other part of it is what you'll see is a lot of innovation coming around. And I know for better, for worse, depending on the category and how people view that, I think you're going to see a lot of innovation coming forward within agave in general, whether it be tequila, mezcal, and again, agave distillates. I think as people start to you have a lot of great agave spirits out there, and we talked about even Mexican, like for example whiskeys and potentially gins and that kind of thing. To those are innovations, right? To put their own spin on it, to put their own cultural sort of undertone and backbone into it. And I think we should be open to that, given not everybody's a style of drinker that we are. Like I remember doing an interview years back when they're like, Jaime, do you think that, mezcal is going to cannibalize or eat up, tequila? And I'm like, great question. my gut tells me, and I'll get, clearly my head probably went to like, that back to that first day at work. Do I still have a job? But moreover, I remember thinking,
you're like, should I
remember being
yes?
far
No.
right. Well, I remember feeling far more cemented in. You talk about your voice, and I remember being far more cemented and far more entrenched and far more familiarized with everything that was going on and consumer trends and eating and drinking habits, which I take a lot of interest in. And I remember thinking, you know what? I'm going to stand firm and say no. And this is one of those things that's going to go on record. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And that is absolutely okay. It's not the first time I've been wrong. I'll deal with it. But I remember thinking, no. Why? Because people have different ways of approaching things. People like things stylistically different. There are those things where, they complement each other. For example, some people will go to drink tequila and move over to mezcal and never go back. Some people will do both. Others will just stick with mezcal. There will be those things. And then lo and behold, a lot of people were like, I personally don't like mezcal. I'm sorry, Jaime. I remember they would apologize to me. I'm like, no, don't be sorry. I'm just glad that on record I can still I can still show my face. But the point is that there's millions of people out in the world. Not everybody. I remember launching tequila brands in certain parts of the world where I'm thinking we're gonna go gangbusters. They were like, we're gonna stick with vodka, but like, thank you. On occasion we'll do tequila, that kind of thing. And so, I think that's where we're at. There's a lot of folks out there that like different things. I think it's
yeah, I think there's
mass consumers. I think we're at a point.
Well, speaking of what everybody's drinking, Misty, what are you drinking? This is a good chance to give your brand a shout out.
Oh, I'm drinking some Tobala.
Ooh, very nice.
I feel like Tobala is a good noontime mezcal.
I
wanted to hear how you justify drinking in the middle of the day, albeit no one's touched on how much of a perk that it can be in your job, right?
Jaime, I think that, in Oaxaca, the mañanita is a very important thing. And when you're in Teotitlan and the market, there's this little stand where all of the older women go in the morning and they have their mezcal that's infused with herbs. Ron always said, our morning drink, our mañanita, and you can never have just one mañanita. And I was watching a video recently from my friend Susana. She has a cooking school in Oaxaca and she's with her groups, and they were in Teotitlan with this woman who's a weaver, and she was feeding them lunch as well. And she was talking about, like, of course we have to have our mezcal with our lunch, and it was before noon, and she was like, well, it's our mañanita. And you can never have just one mañanita. And I was like, oh, it's really a thing.
It's really a thing. You need to mix that up. I love it. Any excuse to have that. And Jaime, what are you drinking?
This is going on record, so I'm going to be careful about what I say. No, I think I was, yes, I think the truth is different nips throughout the day. And I do agree that there's some things that are much more friendly in the morning than the afternoon, that kind of thing. So I opted for Maestro Dobel Diamante, which is the world's first Cristalino. And this is something that I think is worth talking about for me only, and I'll keep it brief, but I am a Blanco drinker at heart. I'm a Blanco reposado drinker. I love to taste the agave. I love to taste the nuances of the herbaceousness, whether it's got that minerality in it. It's why, I don't like my mezcal as aged, right? Like, It's why I love those nuanced stuff. You're like, tequila's got the H part down, great. And then I reserved the reposados añejos for special occasions kind of thing, depending. So why I went with this one is because it's got all the benefits of that, right? But then I get the beautiful little nuances of the oak and the finish and that sort of drier finish at the end. So I've come to really appreciate Cristalinos in the last probably 4 years. And I won't go on record as saying this, but I remember being somewhat skeptical at first. But I've come to appreciate them, particularly in Mexico. I know that they drink them differently there. It's very much with soda and elongated, what have you. But I sip them, and I appreciate the nuances that it brings together with some of the char of the barrel, et cetera, but still have something. So that would be my daytime choice, given its complexity yet lightness, if you will.
Fair enough. I like that. I am a reposado drinker at heart. I do love my mezcal, and I definitely like my topola. But if I'm not drinking mezcal, I drink my rum. I am definitely a rum drinker. And I'm going to give my brand a little Capali rum from an organic and 98% sustainable rum from Belize. It's actually quite nice. It's more like a rum agricole. So it's distilled 100% from sugar that they actually, cane juice that they actually grow right there on the farm. So that's it for my brand plug for today.
Well, salud.
Well done, everybody.
Salud to you, ladies.
Salud to our brands. All right, so education course. Okay, so because I know we've already been talking for a while, but and we talked about your job and what it is, Misty. But what I want to talk about is something, and I think it's very specific. Meaning, like you were doing your job for a while. Your job started changing into a role where it became more sales, and you realized at some point this was not your role for you. And this happens to a lot of people, where like you're doing your job. And you just realize like it might be transforming into something, or you have a different goal for yourself. And how you have that conversation with your boss is important to have it at all. Like instead of just staying in the job or quitting, to actually approach your boss. So talk about like, why you wanted to make that change, how you had that conversation. Yeah.
And so my situation was pretty unique in that at the time I was the only ambassador for the United States for Del Maguey. When I had started, it had been me and Ryan Fitzgerald, and then he left to open ABV, which thank God he did because it's such an amazing bar. I'm so excited for him. But my boss wanted to backfill that position right away, and I could see the landscape changing and recognizing that having two people splitting the country was not going to be effective for a very long time. So I kind of put myself in this position of saying, like, let me just do the job and see, let's build a longer plan than just right now. Let's look at what the next 5 years might look like, because maybe it's not somebody who's in San Francisco, maybe we need to look someplace else first, and so that meant I was doing everything, as far as distributor management, all of those things. And it just slowly, I could feel that most of my time was being spent on spreadsheets, and it was being pushed in that direction and towards all of the sales kind of things, which is obviously always going to be a part of a brand ambassador job. Don't ever think you're going to be just the person out there spending money. There's always an aspect of sales, and you're going to have KPIs around it, and that's totally fine and should be expected. But for me, one of the things that I loved about my job was the emphasis on education. And so as that shift started taking place and it became more about sales and more about the spreadsheets, I could feel myself becoming unhappy, and that we spend too much time working. And I know I'm saying this from a place of privilege, 100%, but for me, if I'm not happy in my job, I have to do something to change that. I just can't do it. I don't want to wake up every day regretting that the fact that I have to go to work, or, it's terrible. And so I just sat down with my boss, Michael, and I said, here's the deal. This is how I feel my job is shifting. And if that's the direction that you see my role needs to move towards, I probably won't be here for very long. Just because that is not something that makes me happy. And I'm thankful that, Michael's such an amazing boss, and he was so he was so wonderful in teaching me all the things I needed to know in order to actually be doing that, and to be doing this role. Because coming from the bar into a brand ambassador position, there's so many unknowns and so many things. And he was so wonderful about how he introduced and taught me all of those things. But this was the moment where I'm like, this is a great boss, because he was like, okay, let's talk about what you do want to do. Because the company was going to be growing and expanding, and he was providing me an opportunity to really create my path and create my job. And it kind of set out for us a list of what we were looking for in our next hire.
Nice.
Who's the yin to my yang, like we needed somebody that was going to complement the direction that I was going or wanted to go and complement my strengths, and so it was super important, not just for me to be happy in my job, but for the company to be going in a direction where all of our I's were dotted and our T's were crossed, right? We were able to, even if we only had 2 people working in the US outside of my boss, they were 2 people that could get the job done together, and the things that needed to be done. And that was super important. And so I'm really grateful. And how you have that conversation is going to be very different depending upon who you're working with, right? Because I'm working for a company that is, Del Maguey couldn't be further from corporate if you tried, And so the way that you have a conversation around that is very different than being in another organization. But you have to advocate for yourself, and you have to recognize if you have enjoyed the job, but it's turning a corner, don't just say I'm out. Have the conversation, because they may not know that you're unhappy. And all of a sudden they're blindsided when you give your notice. They're like, wait, if we had known you've been a huge asset to our team, we don't want to see you go. Let's see what we can do. And I think a lot of times people don't think they can have that conversation. And you, not only can you have that conversation, you should have that conversation.
No, I agree, because it is harder to get. And the one thing I tell people on the show a lot is that, trust me, they don't want to let you go. They don't want to fire you. It takes a long time to replace you, especially for a long time. So not everybody's willing. I mean, I remember when I changed roles, and when I worked for Diageo, I changed many roles many times. And then to get the role when I became the head mixologist and brand ambassador for them, like it took 3 bosses for me to have, like, I would have a conversation one, and they're like, yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand what you want to do, because they couldn't see the vision I had. Because brand ambassadorship and mix was a new thing. They were like, I don't know what that is. So they couldn't see it. And it took a few conversations, like until one person actually saw it and advocated for me. And the reason why I left Diageo eventually is because there was I kept trying to have a conversation with somebody like, this is what I want to do. They just couldn't see it. And I realized I had hit a point where I was like, oh my God, I've come to a point where I can't present the vision in a way that and that also is something now I learned how to do, but learning how to present your vision is also really, really important so that they can wrap their brain around it. And I was lucky I got recruited by Anheuser-Busch. So the opportunity kind of knocked on my door, and they were like, that's a pretty good opportunity. They're like, that's a global role. It was a very big leap. So they were like, we don't want you to leave, but we don't want to stand in your way. But yeah, it is important. Jaime, I don't know if you've experienced it yourself, where you've had to advocate and like how you approached it.
100%. I think it goes back to, I think on 2 fronts. One, when you talk about how you are evolving or performing as well as growing as an ambassador, I think you have those conversations more often than you probably even realize, right? You're basically saying, listen, I know, there needs to be alignment first and foremost in terms of what the company wants to achieve via your talents and your strengths, right? And whether or not you fit into that overall vision. I think that it's imperative that a lot of folks, a lot of importers, brand owners, et cetera, profess to want to be an advocate and engage with the trade as well as consumers in a way that's education minded as well, and the truth is there's a finesse to that, right? There has to be a vision in terms of what you want to achieve. And much like corporate goals with a 5-year plan, there needs to be a plan in place in terms of how you grow your ambassador team, in terms of how you advocate, in terms of what the advocacy program overall looks like. So I think for me, those conversations were had, and luckily I've been, I spent the last 12 years working for a company that was very supportive of that, and that, if I said this is what I want to lead in, that was given the opportunity and and the autonomy to do that and to lead with, and they lead by example and to say, this is what I think I could do. I've had the privilege of mentoring a few people that have gone on to do great things in this industry. And it's one of the things that drives me most. So now to be at the head of a group of ambassadors that will go out and do something similar, at least that's the goal, that's the vision. Again, I revert back to what I thought was important early on in my career, and that is alignment, right? Alignment with the person you are working with and for, in understanding this is what I want to achieve. But now I have a lot more say in sort of hopefully in terms of how we approach the advocacy game and how we engage with bartenders of trade as well as consumers. This is an opportunity for all of us, meaning the company as well as the people leading the charge, to do what they loved. Because to Misty's point, a lot of people, I find that they're very rare. It's very rare that you'll find there are certain jobs, tasks, call them, life passions that people will do solely for because it's a passion point, right? Most of us, yes, you can be a doctor, you have to have a lot of training, and you hopefully you love people, and that's in part what drives it, but usually it's a little bit more than that. Here with ambassadorship, it's almost always, I love the subject matter, I just want to do it. And oftentimes you'll find that people will dive in and do it even if they're not 100% happy, that kind of thing. But it's one of those thankless jobs that people go out there and do day in and day out. And sometimes you're fortunate enough to be in a company where it really does revolve around that and talk about an inertia and a push to really get you out there, right? And do these great things. And in others, sometimes it's more of a challenge. It's more of like, listen, this is what I want to do. And sometimes the employer goes, yeah, no, but your job is to just educate, and then we get a sale out of it. And you're like, well, no, back to Misty's point early on, this is a long-term play. This is a thing that we cultivate and nurture in the long term, and we will see, it's quantifiable in a qualitative way. And that takes time. It's not just a sell-through. And so I had those conversations.
You have to present the long-term vision. You have to see, like, I recognize
it's imperative.
This is how this is going to tie into your goals. So, and that's important, because to your boss not be able to visualize it, and that's fine. But if you present it, it's presenting the corporate is so different. Or to your boss, it's like they have their own goals. They have their 5-year goals. And it's like, okay, so this is where I see what I could do. I'm willing to have a conversation of how that looks. And then this is how it ties into your goals. This is how I'm going to help. What I want to do is going to help you achieve your goals. If you don't make that connection for them, sometimes, at least in my thoughts, they're not going to see it. So
I think as someone at the forefront of this, if depending on the role, for example, in Misty's case or in my case, or in Charlotte Voisey's case, and those cases where people are truly at the helm of the ambassador team, then it's imperative that we be the translator. Absolutely, because no one speaks trade, right? No one speaks bartending. No one speaks, hospitality the way that those of us who came from it do, or have been working with it for years do as well. That kind of just gets more and more. It becomes one big massive ball that just gains traction and grows bigger. And the truth is, that's okay. That's what makes us experts in our own field. That's what makes you a viable, commodity, and a person that is worthwhile having on anyone's team, is someone that's driven by passion, sure, but that understands the premise, the job at hand, and can fuse the things together. I oftentimes tell folks, let me be that conduit. Let me be the translator. When someone sits and creates a program and I, delve in and realize, it's hitting the wrong touch points. This is going to be, completely dismissed by the reader, right? By the consumer, whoever. Let's think and act differently. Let's make sure that we're conveying truly what we're feeling in a way that's approachable, in a way that's digestible. That's my job. At the crux of what I do, at this far in, I should have learned enough and grown enough to know how to essentially, to your point, bridge those things together. And I think that's probably one of the most exciting things in my job now, and one of the challenges I look forward to tackling, in that, we're taking a portfolio of spirits that hasn't addressed the trade nearly as much in the past, and the trade is something I'm very passionate about, right? Consumers, bartenders, distributor partners, etc. Is how to enlighten, because to me, at the end of the day, if I'm honest with you, we compartmentalize people and folks into these functions, but the truth is they're people. To me, they're just people. Mm-hmm. And my job is to get people in love with Mexico, in love with tequila, in love with agave, love with mezcal, you name it. Bring the onslaught on. I want them to be in love with it, and I want them to know why it's worthwhile loving. And those things are things that
we're going to talk a little bit about because I know we've been on for a bit. So I'm going to skip one or two of the questions, but I think one of the things important because you guys are both people who hire people into your company. And as you said, people who stand up for people within your team. So you both have some you guys have both taken courses and education courses. And so 2 questions. One, what are the courses you felt had the biggest impact that have really helped you in your career? And 2, what are some of the things when you're hiring somebody, are those some of the things that you look for? Because, a lot of people who are looking to get this role, like people come to me like, are there things I should be doing, taking, how much does it influence you? So Missy, what are some of the most impactful education courses that you've taken for yourself?
Well, Bar 5 Day was remarkable, and, to be transparent, I'm now part of the faculty and I teach a couple of classes with them. But I mean, to be able to do that, to really focus your time, energy, effort for an entire week, from 9 o'clock in the morning to it was really remarkable, but I think one of the things that we have learned in the last year and a half is that there are a lot of other ways for us to learn. And I don't think, all of the classes are amazing, but they're not actually viable for a lot of people from a financial standpoint, things of that nature. And so really recognizing the online resources and the reading that's available, you can get a really great education if you are self-motivating as well. And so when I'm talking to somebody for a position, I am not looking specifically for an organized class because, that's just not possible for everybody, right? Whether it's from a financial standpoint or because they have a family, there's all of these different reasons that it just may not be possible to take a class that's as in-depth as that, Mm-hmm. And so I think we do a disservice in our industry a lot of times looking specifically for particular types of degrees or accreditations or whatever it is, because life is experience and being motivated to learn on your own mm-hmm. is actually an amazing tool for somebody to have. I think it's more impressive for me if somebody came to me and said, I haven't been able to do a class like that, but let me talk to you about all of these things that I've found myself that I've been embracing to improve my knowledge. Because for me, that self-starter, that's the person that I want on my team.
Absolutely. Yeah. The job as a brand ambassador, you need to be a self-starter and entrepreneur. And, the one thing I've seen with a lot of the brand ambassadors, one of the things common of all the things that people I've interviewed here is seeing the things they're doing outside their media, just seeing their motivation, whether it's doing competitions or motivating themselves to take courses, like whatever it's on, like just showing that they have motivation to go above and beyond, because this job takes somebody going above and beyond. It's not mm-hmm. a normal everyday job. It's an entrepreneurial kind of role, and you do need to go above and beyond. So showing that they have that drive to keep improving themselves is definitely something that seems to be a very common factor for many mm-hmm. folks that have been very successful within this industry. And obviously within the brands now, it's like one of the benefits of being a brand ambassador is hopefully your company is paying for you to be able to take extra courses and things of that nature. Jaime, I know for you, you've gotten some certificates down in Mexico about tequila. Do you feel that's important for people? If they have the means. I know you're right, Misty. It's not possible for everybody to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
Right. No, and to Misty's point, listen, I took the Master Mezcalero course out in Oaxaca, learned a ton, but I've done a lot of certified courses from Mexico, the CRT, Bar 5 Day here. Of course, we can go on and on. Right now, there's WeSet, there's all these things, and so. But if I look at it through a couple of filters, one is whether or not you have that accessibility, right? Not all of us do. If you do, there will be probably some courses I would probably, as a newcomer, who's a starter, I would probably suggest. However, Misty touched on something very important that I was kind of chomping at the bit to talk about, and that's when you look. I talked about mentoring folks in the previous few questions, and when you find somebody that's enamored by the subject, that clearly shows it, that's impassioned, that is malleable, wanting to learn, fluid in their own right, because I will say it's something that I found works for me, right? As a person, I love to continuously grow and learn from my mistakes as well as life experiences. And there's nothing that beats life experiences, especially when we go back to my initial comment, which is we're all people. We're dealing with people. Nothing that resonates more than that sort of that vulnerability when you talk to somebody. And even when it comes to your brands, the ability to say, I don't know the answer, or you're probably right, this isn't for you, however, this is what this is. These are all times and points where like you're showcasing your how malleable you are, how fluid you can be, and we are all here and capable of learning. It's whether or not you want to, whether or not you're open to it. So for me, a young ambassador chomping at the bit that loves the subject matter clearly represents that, clearly transmits that, and is willing to learn is somebody that I can work with, somebody that I can train, somebody that I can share a reading list with. I will say, you know, it is a very different point in time than when I first started out. There weren't very many books, right? I have some right here to my left that, you know, that I can show you that are back from like 1987 and aren't that great, right? But now we have books about the ambassador. We have books about ambassadorship. We have books about, you know, tequila and how, you know, how it's evolved, and mezcal and its roots and the culture behind it. So we have all these beautiful now, you know, sort of holistic sort of approaches to the subject matter that you can now tell somebody to go and learn. But again, I insist that none of that, all of that trumps how we then apply it in real life situations, how you then deal with it, and how when you progress through your career, you then take from what you've learned and continue to use it, utilize it. I mean, that's how I got to where I am now. I won't lie in saying that that's what I hope to be able to impart in this new role is all the things that I've learned from being an ambassador, how, and as the, and not, we go back to being fluid, the industry's changing, right? So how do I change along with it? How do I then take a group of ambassadors that are within this mix and prepare them for what will be a shift in the industry, right? In terms of how we advocate for our brands. All those things are things we're all challenged with. So I think if you have the heart, if you have the passion, if you have the willingness, you can keep pushing.
No, I love it. And to all the points about, you know, it's just about your drive, right? And having a goal and a mission and showing that out there in the world, and that you're willing to learn and you're open to new things. I think those are all really amazing points. Well, I know we've been talking for an hour and like 15 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up with my favorite question that I ask everybody. You both have shared some really valuable lessons already. But if there's any nugget of information, right, that you would like to share with other brand ambassadors, you know, that maybe that you've learned through your experience, has kind of helped keep you sane, help you kind of thrive within your role over the years, what would it be?
Jaime, you want to start?
Now I get to now I get to answer the question first. Huh, Misty?
No, I mean, I'll go if you want me to.
No, I'll go.
I'll
go. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Misty. I think that we've summarized and captured a lot of that. Or sorry, I would like to summarize a lot of what we've talked about. So I'm sorry if this sounds repetitive, but it really speaks to where I stand with this, right? And we're talking about, the question was, what would I share with somebody that's coming into this, right? Is that?
Yeah, like one valuable
like
advice, like you just learned it, like, you know, Missy shared with us before, like knowing that like your goal is long term. It's like 6 months, you know, what you're doing now doesn't actually show up for 6 months. That was a very valuable piece of information.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with fluidity. Here's why. Fluidity, I know, is a very colorful word, but it's about the same way that you learn, whether you're tactile, right, or whether you read, you take it in, to Missy's point, or now you go and you live and you learn and you go on a Del Maguey, you know, experience, or you know, or you visit us at one of our distilleries. Like ultimately it's about you know, it's about being open, right, and susceptible to the different requests and things, information that'll come. Take that information that is useful to you, harness it, use it. That is not, you know, do away with it. We all have examples of that as we move throughout this industry, but the truth is, no one will do it exactly the same. As much as I try to go through a protocol of how to induct and immerse an ambassador, I have my protocol, I have my format. But the truth is, I noticed that when it lands differently with different people. So there's something to be said about somebody that's like malleable and willing to learn and grow, advocate for themselves, Yes, I think that's something that you should do as you progress. You're not always going to be able to do what you want at first, but I think that as long as you align, so you can see I'm starting to summarize all the things and I'm pulling on my trigger words, but if you align then with, if you align, sad right now. This is how I teach courses, by the way. I try to make it relatable. But if you align then with the powers that be, with the people that employed you, well, then now you can take, you know, the things that you really want to do, if and when, as long as you understand that you're trying to reach a goal. So again, there is that alignment. So fluidity, you know, willingness to learn, you know, being able to go and shift because the industry is changing, for example, and alignment with everybody in terms of what's going on. And you may not know at first, but let me tell you, Misty's giving you examples, I've given you examples. As you progress, you quickly get a better understanding of what they want, how you can get there, and how you can connect the two, right? By connecting the two. And you can connect the two by going, we can still educate, we can still show the bartender a good time, because look, we just came out of COVID, and you know, for us early on, we were like, what do we do to give back to an industry that's given us so much? And at the same time, you know, how do we just provide some relief in all the stress and all of this chaos that's going on? You know, yeah, we can do it through the brand's lens, but there's some heart that comes with that, and it's being able to recognize those things and be able to do those things and still accomplish what you need to accomplish. I think that matters the most. You know, advocacy is something that, again, you know, we will come to terms with how it is that we capture the benefits and the wins, but it really is about creating a feeling and emotion with somebody that's equal to or parallel to the passion that you yourself have for your brand. After all, that's what we're trying to do here. So you know, that person will decide whether or not they catch on, you know. So yeah, that's it.
I love it. You summarize it. You summarize it well. There was a lot in there, but I get it. I know it's a tough question. Well, usually it's about, and I probably could say it better. It's because a lot of people, you know, obviously we've made the mistakes, you know, when you first started the first couple of years, and probably should have framed it that way. It's like, you know, mistakes. But I like the point you made about like understanding the bigger goal, kind of, so that way you can kind of, at least that was one of the points you made.
Oh, was your question what not to do? Was that your question, what not to do? Sorry, I misunderstood in that case.
Yeah, no, I didn't phrase it the right way. I think you summarized a lot, but if I was going to say, I'll let Missy, but then I'll come back to you if you could think about like, if there's something you learned, like what not to do, said it better. Or like,
got it. Well, yeah, because I get misunderstood as well. I have it for
a valuable lesson that you've learned that you like would love somebody else to know. Like Misty, as I was saying, you learned that it's not instant gratification and it's okay. You know.
Got it.
Can I do? I mean, I guess my piece of advice is really for the person who thinks they want to be a brand ambassador.
Yes, go for
it. And that is that, like, you're looking at the job, and you're looking at the pay, and you're looking at what the T&E is going to be, and you're looking at the goals and all of that kind of stuff. And obviously, like, can you meet those goals? Yes or no? Travel, all of these things that look like the bells and whistles, and everything looks great. But at the end of the day, you look at the piece of paper and you're like, I am going to be representing hot dog flavored vodka, right? Like, can you be passionate about hot dog flavored vodka 24/7? Because you're going to be talking about it. If you're doing your job well, your name is going to be synonymous with that product. And you need to have passion for it. You know, you really need to be able to talk about it, even when you're on your day off and you're going to have brunch with your friends, and all you want to do is have your espresso martini. Somebody's going to see you and be like, hey, it's the person who works for the hot dog flavored vodka. And now you have an espresso martini with hot dog flavored vodka in it because they're excited and they want to show you the new thing they've been working on, you know? And even though it was your day off, you've got this espresso martini with hot dog flavored vodka. You know, it's like, it's never off. So make sure that it's really something that you can invest in, you know, that you really are not going to be mad when the super excited bartender who is excited about it because you're doing your job well wants to talk about it when you just came in to have dinner.
Yeah.
You know, like, because that's the reality of it. So make sure it's really something that you feel like you can believe in and talk about and have passion for, because if you don't, it's going to show and you're not going to be successful. So consider everything about it.
Oh, I love it. I think it's great advice. Jaime, did you think of that?
Wait, we're
One
still.
thing. It has to be short.
Wait. Is that the thing to avoid, though? I wanted to know. Is
Well,
that the
I
advice?
mean, hot dog flavored vodka is a thing
Yeah.
to avoid.
I think the point, Missy's point is you make sure you work for a brand you love because it's going to be with you all the time. And I think
right. So two responses in one. All right. So what to not do?
Yeah.
I mean, you stole the words out of my mouth. Is not get involved with the brand you're not passionate about, or the subject matter, right? Because we've all seen it happen. Don't. I'd say don't be so hard on yourself, right? Because if you truly are a professional early on, if you truly want to learn how you see everybody else doing their thing, and you really try to make your own mark, is don't be hard on yourself at first. You're going to find your own voice. You're going to find your own trend. You're going to find your own way of working. I oftentimes find people comparing each other, and I think that's a bad thing to do. I think we said it on the upfront, but I would close with that is I know it sounds very broad and everything right now, but I think those of us that have done this, those of us that have set out to really do it well, you'll quickly understand that there are probably those points and times in your career where you're going, what did I just do? I said that wrong. This is not right. This was misperceived. Because we're constantly on record, et cetera, et cetera. We're being judged in many ways, right? We all have our fans, and some people are not fans, et cetera, and of your brand, maybe not you, but we bear the brunt when you're the face of a brand or a movement. So I would say don't be so hard on yourself. Keep pushing and find those things that work for you in the way you can connect. And I think authenticity is key to that. But just go easy on yourself. You'll find your path.
I love it. No, it's very true. To Miss Point, you definitely have to love the brand. You definitely, don't be hard on yourself because you are going to make mistakes. You're going to say things wrong and own up to them. And my thoughts, like if I know I fucked up, like now I've learned like not this. I say things with such conviction that I realize that like people will believe anything coming out of my mouth. So because I say it so like strong. So I've now learned like, I'm not sure about this fact. I think this fact is true. But I could be wrong. And it's like, because I'm misremembering. So I've now learned to do that, be a little humble and be like, I just don't know everything and I'm not sure. So, and to your point, Misty, about going someplace on your day off sometimes, one fact that my Philip has taught me, and we kind of stay to it, is like, our places that we love that are local, we don't talk business with them so that we can never, they don't know what we do. They know we work in the industry. They don't know we work for brands or own like any of that stuff. And that way we could just relax. We don't talk about like anything about that. It's just a place we can get, martinis and whatever. And yeah, nobody knows. And it's so relaxing. And so find a place and don't talk business and like, don't let them know what you do. Just the industry, and that's about it. You're a bartender, you love product, and you can geek out with them, but they don't know.
Or don't be too emphatic about hot dog flavored vodka.
Or don't be too on that note, on the hot dog flavored vodka, I'm going to end this, but this was great. Thank you to you, both of you. This has been fantastic to catch up with, and it was a great episode. So I look forward to seeing you both in person soon. This will live on Facebook for 2 weeks. It goes on YouTube forever. So if you want to share it or do anything with it, let me know. I'll probably pull some highlights and put it on Instagram. And that's it. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Elaine. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Had a great time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.